Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by Subscriptions. Movies, music, software. Why own anything when you can rent it forever? Now, let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome everybody to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by The Question Is the Answer by Miles Leonard. A read that'll put 100 smiles in your pocket at your local bookstore thing. Welcome everyone to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we're filmmakers and having a lot of issues this morning getting going. Oh, hopefully we don't run into anything on this episode. I think we've solved it, but you never really know. But we're filmmakers and we work in front of and behind the camera. We're actors and we have all kinds of on-set experience that we try to bring to the show to discuss films and tease them apart, see what makes them work or not work, the things that we love, of course. And I think we have a lot going on today. I don't know. I know I had some other fun topic to discuss, but my brain is scrambled fully. I think we're going to get back on track today and discuss a really fun film. What are we talking about, man?
Yeah, today we are covering Heretic, which at the time of this recording is out in theaters. So if you haven't seen the film, please pause the episode and go watch it. We're going to spoil a bunch of stuff, and we want you to enjoy this without any of that mess.
Yeah, we'll look at so many things. I definitely want to touch on some of the cinematography. Shooting in small spaces is so hard. And I definitely want to touch on how they accomplished that in Heretic, as well as some of the dramatic reveals. And we'll, of course, talk about some of the story and writing. There's some things that they do here that I like self-talk as exposition, which is dicey. When and why do they do that, and how do they pull it off? As well as some of the elements of having a philosophical story. I mean, Heretic is all about, ideas and religion. And so we'll dive into some of that. And then, of course, we're going to bring in special guest Hamish Purdy. He's going to talk about working on Heretic and set decoration and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. Two young religious women are drawn into a game of cat and mouse in the house of a strange man. It's written and directed by Scott Beck and Bryan Woods. Cinematography by Chung-hoon, featuring Hugh Grant as Mr. Reed, Chloe East as Sister Paxton, Sophie Thatcher as Sister Barnes, and Topher Grace as Elder Kennedy.
Have you heard this song before?
You just played it.
I mean before tonight. I disagree. I think you've heard it many, many times before, but we will come back to that. You are you not monotheistic?
We believe in Heavenly Father, yes.
Okay. There are three major monotheistic religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. I call them the big three. Judaism, i.e. the original edition, Christianity, i.e. the most popular edition, and Islam, the newer, second most popular edition. May I see your Book of Mormon, please? I'll give it back. Thank you. And finally, after 800 years, this Mormonism, i.e. the zany regional spin-off edition. These are all iterations of the same source material. These sects share many of the same characters and histories, albeit presented with different meanings and perspectives. So, no, I will not accept that you stand there and tell me that you never heard The Air That I Breathe by the Hollies, when I know that you have heard Creep by Radiohead. Oh, yes, you have. Come on. But I'm a creep. Huh? I'm a weirdo. Okay. What the hell am I doing? I know these are things you're thinking right now, but they're also lyrics you recognize, yes? Yes? The Hollies filed a plagiarism lawsuit against Radiohead, which they later settled by proving that the melody and rhythm of The Air That I Breathe appear in Creep. How old are you, 19 or 20? Something like that. Okay, so maybe you know Lana Del Rey, who remarkably was sued by Radiohead for plagiarizing Creep in her 2017 song, Get Free. Iterations. Over time. Diluting the message. Obscuring the original. Judaism is the OG monotheistic religion, which should by a wide margin have the most number of practicing members. And yet it makes up only 0.2% of the world's population. Why is that? Why is the original less popular than the iteration? Is it any less true than the others?
Are we talking about religion or board games or music?
Man, so much happening in this film. And one thing, for me, as someone who's studied a little bit of Mormonism, there's so many fun little wrinkles in this. And one of them is whenever he says you are or you are not monotheistic, right? And he's being just so weird. Hugh Grant, my God. But her response to that is so freaking good because she doesn't actually answer him. If you're really paying attention, what she says is, "We believe in Heavenly Father." Yes. And that's a bit of a dodge because Mormonism teaches that Mormons can become God and have their own planet and that kind of thing. And so technically, yes and no. Like they believe in this earth having one God, but they also believe in the idea that you can become God in every Mormon, etc. And so that's part of their whole game whenever they're trying to appeal to and witness to people. They're playing a bit of a game of dancing around and acting like they're just like every other Christian sect, when in reality they are wildly diverging in some very important ways. If you're a Christian, that is not important to me, to be honest. But yeah, so the writing in here is pretty sharp. But this is going to be one of the rare episodes you and I have actually already talked, because we didn't know we were going to do it when we watched it, and we had a good 15-minute, 20-minute conversation. And so some of our thoughts are probably intermixed already. But that said, have you still only seen it the one time? And if so, how has it been sitting with you? What do you think of this? How does Heretic land on the Todd scale?
It was not I didn't know what to expect. I knew it was kind of going to be a heady film, but I didn't know, how aggressive is it going to be, in terms of horror or anything like that. And I was really looking forward to seeing Hugh Grant in a role like this, and I think he absolutely shines. And I think that the filmmakers stayed true to what our expectations are of Hugh Grant, if that makes sense. Nobody expects him to just be violent. Right. Like, he's just not that character. Maybe he could be, but I think that he's such an iconic character, like person, that and like in all of his roles, he's very proper and everything. It's really upending to have him be that way, but also have him be, this terrible, person at the same time. They do a very good job of having this dichotomy and showing us what we expect from Hugh Grant, but also what we don't expect from him. And I thought that was really smart casting, honestly. And really cool of Hugh to say, you know what, I'm going to go into this world and I'm going to do my own thing, my own way. And I wonder how much of that I assume a lot of that was in the writing. That's what it felt like, because there's just it's so heavy on the writing. I mean, this movie is the writing, right? But at the same time, it's his delivery of all this stuff that I feel like only Hugh Grant could bring. He's so welcoming. So when the girls go in, I mean, it's a horror film, so you're thinking, don't go into that house. But if it weren't a horror film and you weren't sitting in a theater watching this and you were them, you might be okay with going into that house, like he's so warm and inviting. Also, I thought that the sisters were fantastic. Just Chloe East and Sophie Thatcher just brought it, both of them. I don't remember which one is which. Sorry.
So
bad.
Barnes is the smarter, wiser one. Paxton is the more naive, younger,
Gotcha.
feeling one.
So Sophie Thatcher, it just is incredible, specifically in this. When it comes to Elder Kennedy, I thought it was very interesting, and I've kind of lived with this for a little bit now. I've only seen it the one time, and we talked about it since then. But he's very much an afterthought, and I think that I'm okay with that now. Like at first when I saw it, I was thinking, you know what, we don't see him enough, right? Like, we don't see him at the end at all. There's not a, I don't know. Throughout the whole time of the girls in the house, we do cut back to Elder Kennedy a couple of times with him just, mopping the floor or something, cleaning up the space. And I think that that's necessary for us to know that someone's looking for them. Someone's noticing that they're gone and that they haven't come back yet. And then we see him go out into the storm, looking for them. And so we need to cut to him. But I think I didn't like it at when I first saw it, that we never see him again after he comes back to the house, to Mr. Reed's house. But now I'm okay with it, because I think it sends a message. It sends a message of, he wasn't really looking for him. He is not the story. And so we don't need to cut back to him at all. I love the fact that he comes to Mr. Reed's house. He talks to him. He leaves. He comes back because he has this kind of look on his face when he's talking to Mr. Reed that he doesn't believe him. And we talked about this. And so we're thinking, what? Don't leave. Wait, hold on. Okay, he knows something. He sees something. And they do a very clever edit there where he tilts his head kind of and they cut away. So we know that he knows something, or at least we think that we know that he knows something. And then he comes back just to deliver a pamphlet. Comes back to the house and you're thinking, yes, finally, he's going to save them. And the only reason is to deliver the pamphlet. And you're thinking, oh no. And I think that reaction that we have as viewers is really beautiful, of there's something else here. There's something more important going on than what your mission is, which is to proliferate your belief, to the world or other people or whatever. There's much more important things going on. And that actually resonated a lot with me, because I feel like I love my parents. I love my mother very much, but it's just everything about when we talk is about religion. It's all about Catholicism. It's all about Jesus and everything. And we can't have a relationship outside of that. And I'm just sitting here thinking, I would really love to be able to talk to you about other things like music and movies that don't circle back at some point after 2 or 3 minutes to God and Jesus.
Wow.
It would be really nice to have a relationship outside of that. And this is a good manifestation of that, I felt like. So anyway, I felt like the acting was fantastic. The way that they shoot, like particularly that scene that you showed, was beautiful. He lights the candle. We pan around to the second candle, which is closer to us in frame. So what we're doing is we're revealing from the girl's perspective, and then we roll around to Mr. Reed's perspective of the girls as he lights the second candle. It's just a really beautiful little movement, and that we're in a circle. We're like rotating in a circle. So the room doesn't feel any bigger, but we're revealing much more of the room. And it's just a really brilliant way of shooting. I thought it was very unique. Also, just the whole, you're going to witness a miracle, and having the women, down in the basement. I totally unexpected. I had no idea where it was going, no idea what was going to happen at the end. In fact, I was sure that Sister Barnes was going to live somehow. No. And the whole time I was asking myself stuff about what was going on and what was going to come next. But a lot of it was in the dialogue. A lot of it was in the back and forth between the sisters and Mr. Reed. Really Mr. Reed. But then I loved how Sister Barnes challenged him a lot. And then that also, I guess, infused into Sister Paxton, who started challenging him later on in the film. And I think that's what we like to see. We like to see those challenges. Mm-hmm. Even if there are some things, I find myself agreeing with Mr. Reed a lot. Oh yeah, these are iterations. This is a watered down version maybe, or, is this right? Or is that right? How do we know? All of these questions, I found myself agreeing with him. And then when Sister Barnes clapped back a few times, I was like, oh no, wait a minute. That was a really good response to that. Like after that whole dialogue scene that he gives, she brings up a bunch of stuff that he didn't account for. And you're sitting there thinking, in just a few sentences, she totally upends everything he just said and everything that he's doing right now. How is he going to proceed? And it's really beautiful. I'll pause there because I really want to hear your side of this, because you have more experience in this than I do.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I, in the less creepy way, identified a lot with Mr. Reed, just from the standpoint that whenever I was a very religious person, I was a non-denominational charismatic Christian, and the whole shebang, like speaking in tongues, everything, man, we went for it in my church. And now I'm agnostic. But in that heyday, like it was so funny because I welcomed like Elder Smith and Elder whoever, Mormons into my house, to the extent of sometimes I would look through the eye hole and see that, oh, we got Mormons. And I would just open the door and like have them immediately walk in. They'd be like, oh, okay, this is new. and then I would, get into it with them. Like, okay, well, let's talk, here's my hangups. And I would try to, very similar, like let them speak first and hear what their spiel is going to be, and then kind of let them set their own traps before I'm like, well, what about this? Like you just said, you're not so different from Christianity, but there seems to be some very significant ways that you are. Like the Pearl of Great Price, or, the Book of Mormon, like these aren't, canon, to normal Christians. And yet for you, these are the Word of God. Like, how do you still say that you're like, I would just start slowly teasing apart everything that I felt was an issue. And at times I could be a jerk. Like, I'm not going to sit here and act, like I was the best version of Christianity. I wasn't, because there was a lot of pride and ego that I inserted into that, even though I felt like I wasn't trying to be that. And so watching this, I'm like really interested in so many ways, because I love, like, one of our favorite films is Sunset Limited, right? HBO. And this felt like, okay, well, like, we get what you're doing in Sunset Limited. Let's ramp up the stakes a bit and give it a little bit of Saw. Like, how can we really, punch this thing up so that people lean forward and talk about it and think about it and engage them. And that's so dicey. Like, this movie is effectively like one big philosophical lecture. And that's really, really dicey because it can get boring and preachy, and even worse than those two things is that it can be uneven. Like, it's one thing to be preachy, like in Sunset Limited, whenever you're getting two really strong perspectives. And so if you don't do that well, it just suddenly feels like you're punching down and you're building up these straw man arguments. And so having a big philosophical film, you really have to balance it. And I just was floored with how well they did that, because this is a great way of challenging religious beliefs by putting like an unpopular religion at the center of it, right? Mormonism, not very popular as much as it's growing and expanding. And, they have a really smart way of going about, expanding their church. This is so smart, because they're an easy punching bag, but then they make them the heroes so as not to really make them feel like a punching bag at all, but someone that we're sympathizing with and even rooting for. And then we're going to make the anti-religious intellectual the amoral villain. So even if you want to take his side philosophically, you're prone to analyzing what he's saying far more carefully, because you're like, well, I kind of like what he's saying, but I really don't like him. The messenger sucks. And so this approach puts all beliefs into this questionable light. Even if you're religious, you're not automatically going to side with the Mormons because they probably don't nicely represent your own belief system. And no one really wants to side with the deranged weirdo either. And so, it just feels like a very comfortable place to analyze all of these thoughts and ideas. And then to keep it engaging, we'll add this life and death thriller element to it to raise the stakes and keep us emotionally invested in the outcome. An outcome that's built on the philosophical stakes. So it's like we really have to pay attention to all the details, and it's this beautiful circular setup and payoff of an intellectual discussion on religion. Like, genius. And so for me, this became somewhat obvious from the very opening line, because it opens like we're looking at mountains and we slowly pull back to reveal these two girls sitting on the bench. And the thing that Sister Paxton starts talking about is condoms. But it's not that she's talking about condoms that's interesting. It's that she's thinking about the way they're advertised. And so what she's saying, and I didn't write it down verbatim, but she effectively says, I think Magnum condoms aren't as big as they say they are, but people believe they are because it's advertised that way. And so people believe a lie because of good marketing. And that to me was, I leaned so far forward because I was like, oh, a thesis statement. We're making a claim about how people believe things that aren't true based on how they're marketed towards us. And that just screamed philosophical thought, And so I was like, okay, what is this movie really going to be about then? Where is this going? And so from the very opening frame, I was hooked because of just how clever they were going to be about it. And then what's even better is how that immediately gets contradicted by Sister Barnes. She's like, no, well, I don't think so. Like, my sister, her ex-husband used to be married to a guy with a big peen, and he had to use magnums. And so I don't think that's right. And then immediately that's about the time they reveal the advertisement of condoms on the back. And it's like, oh, there's this big idea that they're inserting. And then we reverse to the other side to reveal that not only are these, young women, they're Mormons. Like, you see their name tags, and that's fairly well known, I think, at this point in culture of how to identify, someone, a Mormon missionary. And that just adds a whole other element of like humor. It's a punchline to reveal that, oh, and now we're going to talk about porn and how she is talking about the idea that this girl making a porno is suddenly feeling completely caught to dead rights whenever someone else from off screen yells, "We can hear you," and how Sister Paxton is like, and you could see it in her eyes. That's right. God is real. Divine intervention. And to me, that's so good. Not because I think Mormons would actually be talking about how they watched a porno. Like, that is as outlandish as it gets. But what's so good about it is how it's contorted to be this affirmation. Like, as a religious person, I would always kind of read into what people were doing or thinking based on nothing. And it's just all conjecture. And this movie is so good with all that kind of stuff. And we'll get in, more and more to that. But first, I want to hear what Hamish has to say about working on this thing. So let's see if we can get Hamish on the line. So we are joined right now by Hamish Purdy. You've seen his work for sure on films such as The Revenant, Cabin in the Woods, Bad Times at the El Royale, 1,000 others. Percy Jackson and the Olympians, if you're paying attention to the shows, as well as Pachinko, some of my favorites, and of course Heretic. Hamish, welcome back. It's been a while, my friend.
Thanks, Wes. Thanks, Todd. Yeah.
Oh my God! So you got pulled into Heretic during a dicey time in Hollywood. How'd this project come to you?
Yeah, well, I was kind of enjoying the time off, the sort of forced time off, and I don't know the specifics, but because A24 is not part of the producing guild or something like that, they were able to just negotiate to go ahead with this production during the writers and actors strike, and Phil Messina, the production designer, called me, who works with Soderbergh all the time, and I actually had been up to Vancouver before for, I think it was all the Hunger Games stuff, all those things. I didn't do those. Anyways, he said, "Look, it's tiny, it's quick, it's interesting, it's not going to be your full rate, and we're all excited to do it anyways." I couldn't think of a reason not to. So, yeah, he immediately sent me the script. It was so clever and interesting, and so yeah, it was really. I was happy to do it. I think I told you guys last time we shot. I think the first 6 days, 5 or 6 days, we shot on location, like the church and the girls walking and all that sort of stuff. And then we went into the stage for 30 days, and we shot on 2 stages and built everything in there. And yeah, it was funny. To save money, they even sent all the trucks away. They just unloaded all the gear because we're not going anywhere. Yeah. So everything was just all out there, and it was this massive empty studio, which was easy to come by during the strike. So yeah.
Was that 30 shooting days in the house?
36 maybe. 30 on stage and 6 on location. Yeah.
Dang. That's right. Yeah, that's kind of what I assumed it would. I mean, it's kind of deceptive because on its face it looks like, well, you could probably do that in 15 or 20
16
days. Yeah, on its face. But whenever you actually pay attention to how much detail they're shooting with, like so many specialty shots, and we're carving up these scenes to be very specific to the moment. That just takes time, right?
Yeah, and it was all. I mean, we didn't. There was no rewrites. There was no major changes, but we had to work out all those details, like the Monopoly games and all those tight shots and what was the thing, the Shishio Doshi, the thing that tips, when the water. So that was a specific thing, and we had to get the size right, and so. But we had the time to sort of get it right, and yeah.
How much?
I mean, where do you source stuff like that?
That one we built, the Shishio Doshi we built, yeah, and then I mean Well, I don't know how you want to do this, but there's the main room where we go in, where the girls first sit down, and that's sort of quite middle America, supposed to be nondescript, and then we go into his sort of inner sanctum, like his little church, and that was quite a mix. Although I don't know if we saw too much of it, but that was a mix of all religions. So there was Buddhism in there, and there was basically a Catholic church feel to it, but there was other stuff in there because the idea being him being a theologian and sort of exploring everything. So, oh my God. Yeah.
Were you involved in like the actual production design process at all, or did they just wait to bring you in once it was all built?
No. When Phil started, I guess I started a few weeks later. But while he was sort of looking for locations for, say, the exterior of the house, I was sort of breaking down the script and I know that we needed like card tables for the basement. So what size? Because we have action around there, and then I want to have multiples of them, and like door hardware, super important, right? Because we're just like passing from door to door to door and tight. So I actually had, at the studio, we had way more space than we needed. So I dedicated like this little office to just door hardware. And I had all the walls covered with like different types of door hardware we could use. And because there's doors with locks, there's doors without locks. If you notice the front door, when the girls are scrambling to get out, the thumb latch has been removed, so they can't, there's a hole there. And then there's things with keyholes but no handle, or handle on one side, and we really had to work all that stuff out because it's like a trap, right? So
that's
was all that stuff in the script, or was that stuff that you pulled from?
We worked it out. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, the script is very specific, but as they go along, we're mapping out. We've got some idea of this labyrinth of a house, and we're mapping. Oh, so if they've passed through here, they can't get back through there, so that shouldn't have access. So we just sort of mechanically work our way through it, and then we'd find as we did it, we'd run into sort of, oh, that can't have a handle on that side, or things like that. So. Yeah, you kind of just got to write it all out on paper,
This is the kind of stuff that I love talking about that doesn't get talked about, doesn't get seen. You have a script, and the script is, you can read a script and think, man, that's a great script, that's beautiful. But then when you go in to make the thing, all of these tiny little decisions that make the difference between it being a great movie and you feel like you're in it and this is really happening, and this guy thought about not having a thumb latch on his door, all of these things, somebody had to make that decision, i.e. you in this case.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Some of it's out of fear because I don't want to get this set,
Yeah.
But even like when the card table with the where we can spoil and all that stuff, right? Yeah. Okay. So the card table with the puddle on it. So we had several card tables that were strong enough to stand on, card tables that would collapse. A card table that under the vinyl we had routed out a low spot so that a puddle could form, because she has to tip the water and discover the hatch below. So we knew we had to hold, like you can pour a bucket of water on a card table, but it may just all roll off. Mm-hmm. So we had to put in a subtle low spot so that there was enough water to sit there to do the thing. And then we even had, although it did change actually from the script, in the script he dips his finger in the blueberry pie and draws the line through the middle of the card table, and we're on this side and passing through to the other side. And we were dipping into we actually practiced dipping our finger into blueberry pie, and we tried blood. And anyways, I think he ended up using a piece of charcoal in the end because it was just so dimly lit. But we did work out all that stuff ahead of time because, just saying, oh, and then they'll dip the finger in the blueberry pie and then they can draw the thing. And then it turns out they can't even draw half a circle and get to set, So we want to work, especially with a low budget, or any budget, you don't want to delay the camera. That's the golden rule. So just sort of think of all the things that could go wrong and all the things you want to get right, and then get them in front. Yeah.
That's one of my favorite shots, the card table being tipped over, because it's such
really
a beautiful reveal that's communicating so much to the audience, right? Like everything she's saying, and she's cueing that we're looking for something, and then the water as the camera moves with the table over and reveals as the table gets pulled away to reveal the drain. Like it's all just perfectly in sync, and maximizes the revelation to the viewer, just so that no one's going to miss anything. Which is important in a script like this, to have all that being on the same page, because there's so many ideas and thoughts being communicated. You have to be careful how you reveal things to make sure the audience knows this is important and ties in.
Yeah. I mean, if I can, and this is no shade on Bryan and Scott, the directors. I think the very end where we cut to the vent on the outside that she pops out, and so prior to that, she's at the model in his study, and she was supposed to sort of look into the model and find out where she was, and then notice that there was a vent, and then look up to the right of the fireplace and see at the top of this bookshelf behind some boxes the corner of a vent, and clock that's her exit. So we had set all that up, but I guess for editorial purposes they didn't. So I think that was a bit of a quick jump where he's like, oh, wait a minute, how did she know about that? And we did set that up so that she could sort of look up. And actually, I even think they shot it with her dragging a chair over and climbing up and knocking some boxes over and revealing the inside of that vent. And then, the outside. But whatever reason they
yeah,
trimmed it. So
I assume
but we're
probably for
ready.
speed. Yeah, but to me, I was watching it for the third time last night, and I was like, that is the one jumpy moment where I'm like, how does she go from the maze and finding whatever this little trigger is down there to suddenly she's just crushing her way out of the house? Like, if she found an exit, she shouldn't have to fight that hard to get out. And so there was a missing connective tissue there for me as well.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you picked up on that, because I was like, am I the only one that's getting fixated here? And the model, which we worked hard on the model, and it had to replicate the house, but it also had to look like, Reed made it and not like a professional architecture firm. So there's a certain amount of roughness to it, but we also need the audience to sort of recognize, and it was complete, and you could slide things over and see, well, there's the fireplace, but what's that hole? So we really did set it up for that. So
what? And y'all made that?
Yeah.
And you made that?
One of our guys made it. Yeah. That's cool. Model maker. Yeah. And it was like, he would take it home, work on it, bring it in. Phil be like, this should be taller, and take it home. So it's not a one and done sort of thing. Yeah.
As it goes. Were there any favorite pieces to source? Like I saw last night, I was really paying attention when they get into the basement. There's like all this satanic artwork down there. And I'm like, that had to have been fun.
That was fun. But well, again, I'm not going to criticize, but there was 3 rooms there. It was a witchcraft, and then I think that was the blue room, and then we passed through into the green door, and that was paganism, and then the last door was satanic. That was kind of obvious because it was the black and the red, but I really did sort of keep paganism in one room and witchcraft in the other room. But in the end, the distance between paganism and witchcraft, and it's not that. But the idea being that he even explored those religions in his pursuit of understanding, God and how it sits in our world. So not only did he study Judaism and Christianity and everything, he looked into the fringe ones as well. So that was the idea. Yeah, and then we filled that whole thing with water. Yeah,
that's vital. Like you can't study just the God version. You have to study, if you're going to study Christianity, Judaism, you have to study paganism. You have to study
Absolutely.
Satanism.
And I think if you truly, as unhinged as he was, I think if you truly are looking to find out what is God, what is religion, you do all you go all to the edges and find out, make sure nobody has caught it without you knowing, sort of things. So yeah.
And it's so cool that you took the time to tell that story just visually. Like, it's not said out loud, it's just something there for the audience to discover, like, oh, this guy is really...
they pick it up. Yeah, and then it goes to the last room, the scary, chilly room, and that's when you realize he's just like the worst guy ever.
Yeah. That was... What was your, I guess, takeaway of him as a character? Like, for me, watching this, there's so many interesting things. Like, he's talking about a lot of high-minded stuff, but at the same time, there's all this kind of lingering thoughts and ideas about sex and sexuality. He's just kind of peppering it here and there. And I think my takeaway, and it starts with one of his first big dramatic questions, right? With the idea of, what do you feel about polygamy? And I feel like he is just his own Joseph Smith, where he's using his own ideas and philosophy as a means of abusing women. And it's so much more based than all the high-minded stuff that he's throwing out to these women.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really enjoyed, and I didn't really pick it up until I saw his delivery of it, but the sort of smooth, creepy, smooth, creepy, and it was just sort of like, even the throwaway line when he walks in, says, I hope you don't mind metal in the walls. And then it just sort of leaves it at that sort of thing. And it's like, what was that? And then he's back to like, well, I love religion, and here's my Mormon book. And they're so excited that it's all like dog-eared, and then it's creepy again. And then I remember watching him rehearse, and he would refer to it as good Mr. Reed and bad Mr. Reed. So he dipped in and out. Wow. Yeah. Because of his tone, or I was so impressed in the end with his performance. I mean, watching him work like 7 pages of straight dialogue and stuff like that was incredible. But then in the end, I thought it was, yes, the casting was brilliant, right?
I was just telling Wes right before this that, like, I love that they cast him because you expect a certain kind of
charmer.
You expect him to be Hugh Grant on screen. Yeah. That's how he is, and you get that. But then you also get this other side, which I think is really interesting because we all have this other side that we don't let people see ever. Yep. It's not necessarily like this. Like, this is a little extreme. I don't keep women in my basement, but at the same time, there is this aspect that we all have, and he just lets it out a little bit at a time. So I thought the casting was brilliant. Yeah, I mean, and the girls were fantastic too.
The girls were great. Everybody was great. Even the small role for Topher Grace. Yeah, I think it's almost like weaponizing his celebrity status because we're comfortable with him, right? Like he's so self-effacing and he's charming and romantic, and so there's a certain amount of like ease with which we watch him. Like we don't brace ourselves when he's on the screen, and yet he catches you, and he says creepy things, and it's good. Yeah, really good.
The casting is outstanding. I mean, obviously, I think Hugh Grant should at least get a nomination. Not that these kinds of films really get
maybe.
the respect.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
But I was blown away. I mean, Chloe East, I thought, just delivered an absolute phenomenal performance because she has so much to do. She has a lot of heavy lifting on the performance side between acting so naive and then finding her strength in that combative nature. And casting both of those women, Chloe East and Sophie Thatcher, I believe, grew up as Mormons.
That's right.
Which adds so much nuance and texture to their performances whenever you're seeing something like, there's this moment when Sister Paxton is talking, he flops down his own Book of Mormon with all the notes, and her reaction, Paxton, is like, oh my God, we should be learning from you. And if you're watching that 2-shot, if you watch Sophie Thatcher, what she's doing in her face is like, you can't say that. He's here to learn from us. And she's reacting without reacting. And like, there's all these nuances that I think you can only get if you really understand the lifestyle and perspective of a missionary.
The rules and their actual mission. Like they have like things they got to get done. It's not just wandering through life. They actually have a project. And so they feel a certain amount of responsibility to keep going. And
so is this part of your? I assume there might be a different role for someone who's working on like the cell phone, the texting. Like there's software that you use for that kind of thing. Props. So that just falls under props. Okay. Dean
Goodine, our props master, and I mean, obviously anything. Well, you guys know, and knives and the book and all that sort of stuff. That's all props. So but we work tight with them.
I had a question. So one of our favorite films that we've talked about on this show is Sunset Limited, which has
two guys,
which has a lot of parallels. I feel like, and it's obviously much less action-packed. It's all dialogue. That's all the movie is. But it's all set in one room. And I wondered if that inspired you at all, if you'd seen that first, and if it inspired you in
I mean, one thing, I've definitely seen it. Who's Tommy Lee Jones and
Samuel L.
And Samuel L. Jackson. Well, definitely thought about it, but one of the things we knew is that they're in his living room for a week and a half. Like you kind of think twice. Like it's not just a quick fight scene or something. You really got, if they're going to live in there that long, and it's pretty sparse, right? Then the pressure on everything in there is a little higher. So we really thought about, pre-thought about like sitting at Mr. Reed's chair and looking at the two girls on the couch, and Hugh's gonna do that for a couple of weeks, and the camera's gonna do it for a couple of weeks, and we got to think, is this like, we actually moved the sconces down a little bit, made the window smaller behind her, like that. We made changes because we realized that's not going to hold up over time, or when they go to the window, that on the side the windows were skinny, so you knew they couldn't go out through the windows and stuff like that. So I think when it's pared down, you could drop your guard, like there's not much in here. It's a couch and a couple chairs. But when you're there for long scenes and days and days and days, it's got to hold up. And you're going to want to wish you did things like the stain where the wallpaper kind of is peeling off, and they notice the light fixture in the ceiling had spots for 2 light bulbs, but it only had 1 light bulb in there. And that was very conscious, like he hasn't quite got it all together, but he's trying to make this inviting little room. My idea of the knitting basket, on one chair is like he put that there so someone thinks he's got a wife, and that might be all it takes, right?
Yeah,
that's good enough. They'll buy it from there, sort of thing.
The Bless This Mess wall art.
Yes, yeah, which we custom made, and yeah,
of course,
yeah, of course, yeah,
so cool,
yeah.
Love
and
those
then
things.
Well, there was another little thing I did that I don't think anybody really would have caught, but when he opens up the secret light switch with the timer.
Mm-hmm.
The where the light switch is mounted is we lined that with lead, so that you would think that the house is lined with lead, like his dial. You know what I mean? So if you stop, you look, it's like, oh, this is what the inside of the walls look like, and the lead goes off. And so if anybody were to pause, they would go, yeah, the walls are lined with metal. So yeah,
the 3-dimensional thinking that goes into every aspect of filmmaking, but specifically whenever you're thinking through, like you said, okay, if this side of the door is supposed to, slam lock and prevent them from going through it, you have to think about that. But it's also one of those things, if you don't do it, it's not so much doing it is always going to add the wrinkle. It's so much as if you don't do it, it has the potential of pulling someone out of like, well, why don't they just do X? Like,
yes. That's super important. Yeah. Yeah, because we're all doing that, especially because we live in a horror movie. We're scared with them, and we're like, Jesus, just do, run for the stairs now. But we got to know that that's a dead end, right?
Yeah, I was going to ask if it's harder for a horror film like this than for other films that you've done that aren't in a single room, that where we as an audience are looking for ways for the character
Cabin
to get
in the
out,
Woods, for instance. Is full of,
it just puts more pressure on it puts pressure on the story too, right? Because they have to go, well, why doesn't she just, so like the gap under the door that she grabs the carpet that I put extra long fringe on so their fingers could grab it and pull it and work it towards them. And then that the height of the matchbox had to be a little higher than the door gap. Taking into account the thickness of the carpet, that's sort of. So yes, if they're going to write that, then we got to make sure that we can actually do all this stuff, and limit them,
How was it working with Chung-hoon Chung? Like, that
master.
guy is a master of his craft.
Yeah, very confident. He actually doesn't speak a lot of English, so there's an economy of words that is great, actually, because he's very specific when he asks you things, and we had a good time, actually. There's a scene where the first hallway they go through, and Hugh walks down, Mr. Reed walks down, and then the girls look down, and then there's this profile of this statue. And it turns a little, and then like, what? And then Mr. Reed, and then they come up and they realize it's a statue. That actually happened. Here's a little backstory. I was setting up the end of the hallway sort of thing, and we knew we wanted to do that. And then they were like holding up a viewfinder or something like that. This is weeks before we shot it. And then I was just getting my way out of the shot so that they could see what the silhouette looked like. And then they said something, and I poked my head out, and Chung goes, "Ooh, that's scary. Let's do that." So what we ended up doing was putting the bust on a Lazy Susan, like a little turntable.
God, I was wondering how you did that.
And gave it the slightest turn, right? Enough like, did I see it turn? Did I not see it turn? But that's because I turned my head, and he went, that was scary.
Because I was thinking about that last night while I was watching it. I was wondering, like, did they physically just turn it, but putting it on a Lazy Susan is so much smarter and elegant.
Yeah,
and smoother.
pedestal, Lazy Susan, the bust, and then a little bit of drapery, to sort of break the line. And then I just had my on-set dresser just move it an inch, just to change the profile a little bit. Yeah.
That's and all because you stumbled in at a
well, I just because I bumped my head out and he goes, that was scary, because of the slight movement or something. Yeah. I mean, that's what we need to do, right? You need to sort of get in there and mess around, and that's a good shot. And
well,
happy accidents.
It's an interesting decision because I don't know that I've seen that in anything else at least that I can think of. It's a thing that doesn't move, but you're going to make it move. Or make you think that you saw it move,
just on the edge
for a second. But to actually physically make it move in the shot, even though we never come back to it. It's not something that we go back and see or anything. It's just for a moment of upheaval, right? Because we're expecting to see something around that corner, and we see the outline, but it moving too just heightened it so much more. But then we never go back to it. So it's
we go back to it. It's just rock
it's a
solid.
little uncomfortable little setup there, and I hopefully because I knew it was going to move, I've ruined it for myself. But hopefully it was subtle enough that it was like the girl's experience, which is did I see that move?
Yeah.
Did I see that?
That's exactly what it felt like to me.
And you don't get to look back because it stopped moving. So it's not like it's a constant thing. So that was the idea. That was the idea to sort of set them off. It's also, I guess it's the equivalent of a look that he would give, that Mr. Reed would give, where there's certain looks that he can give that's like, oh, geez, that's a bit, and then he's nice again, and he's making jokes about Radiohead and stuff like that, and but there's these little sort of dips in where it's like, ugh, it's unnerving. So
he reveals himself a little bit, just for
a little bit. Yeah.
How much pre-pro time did you have? Because thinking again about just you're locked in this room for the entirety of the movie, almost for 95%, and having to make all those decisions. The more time you have to think through and process everything that you want to put inside the room.
I'm trying to remember. I think probably 8 or 10 weeks, maybe.
Nice.
Yeah, but it was pretty good. But I mean, it was like they only had like I have a buyer usually, like going and find stuff, and they only had like 6 buyer days. It's like, well, they won't even be around when we're filming and you need a thing, so I had to sort of, move money around and figure out how to pull that. And then my coordinator, who deals with all like purchasing and stuff like that, she only came in like 2 days a week. She was happy to, but it was really sort of pared down because we needed to sort of stretch out what we were able to pull off. So
that's so funny.
That's just fine. That's fine.
People look at something. I look at something like Heretic, and like it's backed by A24, and it just feels like you have so many millions of dollars to make it work, but it's always stretching every dollar out to the max.
Yeah. They're such a big company, but the project itself is this, and which is fine because then you really can't fly off the handle. Like Mission Impossible, as fun as it was, maybe a jet. Those kind of things, and it's like, oh my God, a whole jet,
Do you feel like producers, I've talked to like people who work, in G&E, and they're like, man, we are the last thought on a producer's budget line item. Like they are taking
set
from
decoration?
us constantly. Yeah. So do you feel like y'all get the short end?
Sometimes. Well, I mean, truly, and I'm not going to name names, but some producers think, we're cushions and curtains, right? And it's like, no, it's a lot more than that. And they don't know how much we build and how much we research and all that sort of stuff. So some producers completely understand, but some don't, and some are just concerned with like securing the cast,
Wow.
So. Yeah, I mean, producers, you guys know, you're producers, so there's different hats, and some people are just there to draw in more people, to sort of pull in the contacts. So, but I think at the beginning, the production designer will always defend me, if I'm on the working closely with them and we see eye to eye on the whole thing, and then the production manager just wants my budget. What's the labor going to be? What's your purchases and rentals? And I will track that and make sure I don't go over, and then they'll leave me alone. And I'll leave a little wiggle room for, requests or changes, or, the DP may want something, and I'll say, look, we don't have this in the budget, but Chung really wants this, and we'll just make it work.
Do you have
what was the budget for Heretic, by the way?
I think it was like 13 million or something like that, or 15. It's probably written up somewhere. I think that was the number I remember kicking around. Yeah. 10 of it for Hugh.
Yeah. This is all of it. 10.
I doubt that.
Do you have a wish list of directors or filmmakers that you're still hoping to work with, or do you just kind of take it, whatever happens? Yeah,
more production designers actually, and genres. Like I'd like to do a Western would be fun, but I did do Miami Vice, and I know that it's a fantasy, but Michael Mann wrote Heat 2, and I don't know what the status of that is, but
wow, that's funny because
that would be really cool.
I have a debate right now with Todd in the show notes whether or not we do Heat next week. We'll see if it happens finally. But
you know about One Heat Minute?
No.
There's a podcast called One Heat Minute where they go through Heat
minute by
1 minute per podcast.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's what everybody's saying. And at the end of the whatever 200 and whatever podcast to get to the last minute, Michael Mann gets on the podcast.
Whoa.
Because it grew, right? Yeah.
Oh my God. That's
One
like
Heat Minute.
1,000
What a
episodes.
great concept.
It's been done.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
If he does Heat 2, that's appointment setting for sure. I mean, that was a game-changing film. So
I got
you
no
would
contacts. I got
yeah.
I got no contacts. But directors, whoever comes on.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in actually having done Heretic. I'm really interested. It sounds so arrogant, but I'm really interested in the great script. The one that gets you excited. That's super fun. So
reading straight off the page, you knew this because it's chunky. I imagine the script is just super chunky with big blocks of dialogue and punchy action lines. I've read their other scripts and they're really good at their action lines. And so you just knew right off. It still didn't feel chunky. Could you feel the rhythm of the film?
Oh yeah. No, it was. I could see the whole movie. Yeah, it was great. And I got to say, when we got into in his inner room there, and the Monopoly board started coming out, and we labored over the scale and the size of the altar that he did it on, and I just was like, I think this might be my favorite moment, right? When he's like the zany, what is it called, the zany regional version, and it's the Bob Ross, and it's oh man, I love that.
When he put that on when he put that down, I thought, oh, I know this guy. Like,
yeah.
I identify with this guy. Uh-oh.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Not a good thing.
No. Yeah. I don't. There was so little rewrites, little tweaks and stuff like that, which is so rare. They really had it dialed in, and I think they worked on this thing for a decade before they sort of. Yeah, I think so. I think it's been cooking around in their heads for a while. So yeah,
wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. It was interesting having two directors too. Very very sort of like quick chat and then direct and then quick chat and
could you speak a little to that too? So how did that happen? So maybe there was an instance where there was a question rose and did they step aside and talk to each other and then come back and then okay, that kind of thing.
And I wasn't on set all the time, of course, but I never saw any arguments or anything. It was just sort of like they're sort of what do you call it? Like pressure testing it with each other. Like, will that hold up? Do you think that works? Well, I think it does work, but she should already be over here at this point. It's like, I think those guys are joined at the hip and have been making, movies together since they're Star Wars action figures in grade 8, so they're sort of, that's the way they're going to run it,
I'm excited to see what else they make, just because if this is what they bring to the table whenever they get to just let loose, then it's a high bar. Like for me, the last time I was this excited about an idea within a movie was like Ex Machina, Alex Garland. And so for me, this was really exciting.
That's similar, the way it sort of just drifts away into like, oh no, it just gets worse and worse for him. And that's right.
Is there a production house that you really like working with more than another? Like, is A24 like, one of your favorites? Is it worst?
Yeah, I've never worked. It's more closer to me, like who the production manager is, or the production designer. I've worked, we all up here will work with Disney or, Apple or Paramount or whoever's making whatever. But I think the whoever's at the top, I guess it's just however much money they bring to the project, but it's really the people that are closer to me, like my immediate production designer, what kind of art department, or did they budget enough to do what's on the page? Like are we shooting ourselves in the foot before we even get started, sort of thing.
So what happens when they don't? What happens when they don't budget enough for what's on the page?
Yeah, well,
you literally can't do the job.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of start to have a come to Jesus moment, like, can we cut some scenes out, or can we shoot this in the doorway rather than redressing that entire house that I only have a day to dress and a day to undress, that sort of stuff. There was a movie just before COVID, a TV movie I was going to do called Pieces of Her, based on this this novel, and it was like they actually ended up making it in Australia in the end, but COVID happened. But it was like 300 sets. It was just like lawyer's office, 911 center, the interior of a truck, another motel room, someone's house. Like, it just went on and on and on, and they really didn't allow us a lot of time to get in and out of these places. And I think they just, the mechanics of it, when you work, like, it makes a great story, but when you lay it out on paper and we don't have any stage space, or, we're always on the road. And then because they don't have enough money to do all these things, they reduce the location fees. So we can have access to this place 2 days before we film it, the day we shoot it, and we got to be out by 4:00 the next day. But then we're dressing, and it was just logistically, it was going to kill us. And thankfully, COVID shut it down and we didn't have to do it. But no, that's not it. I'm sorry, but it was one of those things, like, we dodged a bullet, because I think we were going to be able to pull it off, but my crew and I were looking at each other like, I'll see you on the other side. Like, this is going to be a real ride, because we can't make one mistake here. So I think in hindsight, if I found myself in a situation like that again, I might point out a little sooner. It's like, I don't think we can. I don't think we can do this many sets in that many days, sort of thing. It's just too not with the crew that you've given me. If I was running 2 crews and we're leapfrogging, and but
that's a thing that you notice, that because of your experience in doing this, it takes X amount of time to set up a doctor's office.
And you just lay it out on a calendar. It's like, wait a minute, we're in, we're wrapping one place, we're prepping another, and we're shooting another all on the same day, and we're doing that for a week and a half, and I've only got 10 crew members, and I've only got 2 trucks. How are we even gonna, you start to work it out. It's like, we're not going to be able to return anything because we're picking up, that sort of stuff. So the mechanics of sort of ins and outs, for us, it's research, finding the stuff or building the stuff, getting it into the set as soon as the painters have finished, dressing it, tweaking it, letting the pre-light happen. They shoot it, then I got to get it out of there. But I got to be doing that sort of for 4 different sets at the same time. So we're prepping 4 sets, and then they kind of, leapfrog. And Percy's like that, actually. We're going pretty flat out on Percy Jackson right now. But I've got a big crew, so we're able to handle.
What are your thoughts on, Todd and I haven't talked about the ending of Heretic yet, the butterfly. Do you have a thought or opinion on how the Heretic ends?
Is she alive? Is she that kind of conversation? Yeah. I having read it, and it was left ambiguous on the page too. So my wife and I talked about that a lot. Like, what happened to her? Did she, and then the butterfly's gone. So was it ever there? Like, was she imagining the butterfly? They left it plenty ambiguous. I actually didn't really want to answer it for myself. I just kind of wanted to let it sit there. But nice. That was the last thing. We shot the whole thing chronologically from the bench seat. Yeah. Cool, eh? That never happens. Yes. So the first day of first shooting was them on the bus stop. That was the first shot of the first day.
Nice.
The church stuff, they obviously had to sort of fit in, like the Topher Grace character looking for the girls. That was sort of stitched in. But the rest of it was right through to the end. Right? All chronological. And the last thing we shot was her in the snow. Yeah. Cool. I don't know how
so the field that she runs into, is that shot at the end after all of that stuff happened?
Uh-huh.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was the last shot we shot in 36 days. It was her out in the snow. I know. What a pleasure, eh? To do it chronologically. It's never that, you know.
No,
but it's just the way they worked it out. Yeah.
I love that. I love that because then it's really easy for everybody who's part of the production to understand the moment that you're in.
Yes, that's true. Otherwise, you've got to be really head down in the script, like the directors and the supervisor, and
I mean, you can't be like, you know, or it's. I imagine it's much harder to be in the basement shooting the scene with all the women in the cages, but then the next day to be shooting in the main room with the blueberry pie candle.
Yeah. No, they never went back. And in fact, the living room where they first sit down was in one stage, and then they go down the hallway past the creepy sculpture, and then when they go into the other room, the sort of churchy room, that's in the stage next door, raised up because they had the stairs down to the basement. And so while they were filming that, we changed that living room into the study.
Wow.
Yeah. So you're okay. So you're, and that's to save money because we were like, we don't want to build more, we moved a wall in. And you know what, when he goes to get the Mormon book, he goes over to a wardrobe that's in an alcove. Uh-huh. Well, that wardrobe was removed, and that alcove was the doorway that she comes through to get into her study. There's a spoiler. Yeah. Yeah.
That's so cool.
It was easy. It was Phil's idea. It was like, well, we'll just move the back wall in, scrub out the windows. We'll change the fireplace around from an electric fireplace to a real fireplace, and then change the wallpaper, and we've got the floor already and the ceiling's there, and so it was the same room sort of scooched down. It also means no going back.
Yeah.
You better be happy with what you got because it's gone.
No pickups.
No pickups. Exactly. Yeah.
Oh my God.
And what other? The slideshow was a last minute idea.
Really?
Yeah, because it was originally the art on the walls, like when the curtain raises, and that was all storyboarded. But the curtain raises, and it's all the art on the walls, which we sort of dry fit before and trying to get because he had to walk around and point to different things. But then I think it might have been Hugh's idea to have a slideshow, which is old tech, right? So we ended up buying like 5 or 6 slide projectors that they're 40 years old. The plastic is brittle. And so my guys were like, we're going to learn how to fix slide projectors. And so we would get one running, and then we would get it, because they would the advanced teeth would break, because they'd just been drying out no one uses them anymore, right? So old plastic. So my guys were like, we're going to figure out how to do this. And so we had these backup slide projectors, and the art department was making our own slides to put in. And it was a very last minute idea, but we were all like, that's a really good idea because it
totally fits because my impression of him giving the spiel is that he's been doing it for a while. Like he's still making this Radiohead reference to these young 20-somethings as if Radiohead is still popular. And so I imagine he started doing this in the mid to late 90s and he still has, using the same beats and I've updated it. It's got Lana Del Rey now, which is at this point still getting old. So having a slideshow
you can
works.
even say that the girls that are trapped in the basement had to hear the Radiohead stuff, right?
Yes.
And that's how long we've been. Yeah.
That's a great touch. Oh my God.
Yeah, it was cool. Yeah. That room was quite they shot in there the longest, that room with the pews and the whole key in the wrong pocket. I loved all that stuff. That was great.
It's so sharp and well put together. The hardest thing to me to make a film around is tight spaces, staying in a house all at once, for the majority of the runtime. It can get very taxing visually to the viewer, and the way that
the script has to pick it up.
You have to. And it just seems like everything was so well organized for the viewer, not just structurally, but also visually, so that, okay, we're moving more and more into tighter, and now as we get tighter, we're able to focus on the story beats and how everyone is kind of picking up on each other's vibes. But then the lighting also seems to add a lot of dimension and mystery, so that, okay, fine, we're in the same space this whole time, but we can shift the lighting suddenly and it becomes visually interesting all over again, while also heightening the stakes and ramping up the tension, all that kind of stuff.
Very conscious. And Chung, like, pushing in further and as we go, just tighter and tighter, so you feel like it's just, it's getting a little claustrophobic. Yeah, very conscious. Yeah.
And it feels just part and parcel to what you're doing. Like, it's all in harmony with each other. It's not like you're stepping in as an afterthought, like you're a part of that storytelling method and methodology.
Yeah, and also the fact that we were all like going to be stuck in this studio without like different units all over the place, and we got to get a meeting going. It's like the guys are there, like just walk down and talk to them, right? They're into, we obviously they're busy, but you got to book some time. But it's like, we want to talk about like church pews, or we want to talk about candle lighting. Let's talk it through, right? Like, oh, it's the littlest thing. It's like, no, actually the candles are all way too short. We got to get them higher because he's standing the whole time, and that sort of stuff. So to work all that through and to be able to, no question is too small. We even had, I think, our art department assistant, like, I've got a picture of him like in one of the cages, that the girls are in. It's like, does that look uncomfortable enough? Does that look too, can you stuff a blanket through the hole? And the poor guy's in there. It's like, well, it's not that bad. It's like, okay, we're going to lower the top and squish it down a bit. Okay, it's getting pretty uncomfortable now.
Perfect. Just right.
Oh.
Just right.
How hard was it getting the women in and out of those cages?
Easy. Yeah. No, we had easy. Yeah. Yeah. Huge. They hired contortionists. That could fold and do all that weird stuff. Yeah. But that was a creepy, and we really made it cold. We made a chilled set. Yeah.
So the breath that you see, that's all real. Wow.
Cheaper to have a fridge than a CG, right?
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, we actually built it in the loading bay and opened the door because it was like late November, and then sort of hung some plastic, and then the special effects guys just like chilled the whole set. And so, just to get that sort of, and then the whole air freshener, that went through a lot of testing. And, I know we saw it just once, but it was like, how tall should the air freshener be? And we really got granular on that stuff.
Oh my God.
I wanted to ask you, and we might have talked about this in the last time that we chatted a year ago, but how do you know that you want to get into something like this for our listeners who might not have caught that last episode?
Like my department?
Yeah.
I guess, I mean, the common job for entry level on a movie is PA, production assistant, and you could be parking cars or getting coffee, but really you're exposed to everybody. And I guess if you're a PA or just around set, I get certain things are going to interest you. Like, I like it when they blow stuff up, or I've always liked sound, or, I think you'll just sort of gravitate. And I very quickly gravitated towards the look of it and the make-believe of it all, I think I just always been sort of fascinated with that sort of thing, and it just felt comfortable in that direction, as opposed to the technical aspect of lighting or camera or something like that. It was the make-believe of it. I've said before in interviews, like, I remember as a kid getting like a spongy foam rock from, like, my uncle came back from somewhere and he had a fake rock, and I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. Like, it was just a dumb phone, and now we're making miles of this stuff at work, but I'll never forget, like, looking at it going, it looks so much like a rock, but I can throw it at my sister and it doesn't hurt, and those sort of seeds, I believe in that stuff. Like, I had I was into magic as a kid, and tricking and fooling and all that sort of stuff. And I had a drawer, like, I had an underwear drawer and a sock drawer and a t-shirt drawer and a magic drawer. And it had all my, like, magic tricks and stuff in it. And I loved that sort of little bit of theater, a little bit of make-believe, little, misdirection, that sort of thing. So some of my favorite stuff in movies is making something that looks like something, but it isn't, So like in the case of The Revenant, like making it look like it's the 1822, but really, there's a whole bunch of plywood under there, and, or I really enjoyed the mountain of buffalo skulls that we did in the dream sequence of The Revenant, if you remember that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that was based on just a historical photograph. And then Jack, the designer, figured out how to do it, and it was super easy. Like it was not hard. I mean, it was a bit of work, but it was like, we can knock, because it was only two-sided. It was flat on the back, and it was a lot of styrofoam molds and repetitions and stuff like that. And it was just like the joy you get of like, that totally looks like 10,000 buffalo skulls piled up there, but it's not.
Now that's like an iconic shot from that film.
It's
just very, but it's a bunch of styrofoam and plywood and stuff.
But the joy of like creating the illusion, but figuring out how to do it, and you only need to do this. You don't need to do the other side, because we're never going back there. So there's so many advantages we can take. We take advantage all the time of the fact that things only have to last long enough to be shot, right? So the way we build things, the sort of fast, slap together sort of like good, that'll be good enough as long as it looks right. It doesn't have to last the winter sort of thing, So like when we build scenery and things like that. So
yeah, it's different than for like a stage where you have to perform, where people are performing day in, day out, multiple days, right? This is like, it's just has to live for an hour so we can get this shot, and then you can demolish it. It
has to look fantastic.
Right.
But the other side can be crap.
Yeah. So you started as a PA, I would assume, and then you gravitated towards.
Honestly, by noon of the first day of the first movie I ever worked on, I was over with those guys, because it was this independent little movie, and I was like, what are those guys doing? And I can help, and let me help you. And those are my type of people. So
That's cool.
it could have gone, I guess it could have gone another way, but for me, I was interested. I felt comfortable around them. I felt I could contribute. I have a very strange, not a photographic memory, but I can remember very specific things from my life. Like, people ask you, like, what's your earliest memory?
Oh, yeah.
I remember looking at my friend's diaper and thinking, oh, it's pinstriped. So how old are you then? And why do I remember that? So that sort of stuff.
How did you know what pinstripes were?
Well, I mean, I remember
now
looking
you
at them
know.
going, they're striped. Mine aren't striped. Those are different. But I also remember where I was standing. I remember what it looked like. I could go to my old house and so why is that sitting in there on a dusty shelf? But I do take advantage of that in my work, that I can remember. I don't know why I have it, but I can remember very specific things and looks. And so maybe because I can remember things like that, I have no control over what it is, but they're just in there. Maybe because of that, I look at details a little differently than other people or something, or maybe I've developed it a little bit. But like I can walk into a set that we've just dressed, and I can just walk around and quickly find all the little things that we have to change to get it exactly right. They pop out at me, sort of thing. But a lot of people can do that. It's just something you develop,
Yeah, but it's probably a muscle too. Like if you use it every day for your work,
Yeah. And also,
like if I were to shave, Wes remembers a lot, but if I were to shave, he wouldn't recognize me. He has but he remembers everything about every movie he ever sees. So.
That's right. Yeah. It's not his choice what stays in his head. It just is.
Right.
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
That's
so
awesome.
I guess that sort of the look of a show has always fascinated me and excited me, and it's why I went there.
Dude.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Where can our audience learn more about you? Do you have a website or Instagram?
Yeah, if you want. Yeah. HamishPurdy.com.
Awesome.
I don't know, just if you want to see what I've done, and IMDb and stuff like that. So, but always nice to talk to you guys.
Dude, yeah, thank you so much for making time for us. Really cool.
Great work
Absolutely.
on Heretic.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Anytime I can see a film and I can see what you do in a film, it lifts me up. It makes me so happy, seeing your work. I think you're excellent, amazing at what you do.
Yeah.
We both do. We look up to you for sure. And best of luck on all the stuff you're working on. And I hope you get some great projects too in the future,
Thanks,
man.
Todd. Thanks, Todd. Thanks, Wes. Yeah, I'm glad, and I'm really glad that you guys, in your podcast, I realize how much you pay attention to everything and really get into it, and it's a pleasure to listen to. So I'm glad you guys do it. Yeah.
Wow, it means a lot.
Nice. All right.
Thanks,
Well,
Hamish.
maybe sooner than a year. We'll talk again.
Heck yeah.
I love it.
Man.
Okay. Awesome.
Thanks, Hamish. Talk to you
Merry
later.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Bye, guys.
Bye, Hamish.
I'm telling you, we got the best listeners. We
That's
the
what I'm
best
saying.
music. Oh, dude, yeah. There's so many things in there. I'll be picking that apart while I'm editing just to refresh everything he just dropped on us. My God. Yeah, I'll run through a few more notes. I know we're starting to run long, so a couple quick things on cinematography, just to circle back to the shooting in small rooms, because that is so hard. It is so difficult. And for this, one of the reasons it really works is because it's incredibly narrative driven. It starts, right? The space is itself a strong contrast to all the open spaces we're introduced to in the opening. And so this creates a really strong, sense of mystery and claustrophobia, just by the visual contrast of entering the house itself. They give us all this open space and then take it all away. And we kind of feel the way they feel. It's dark and, it's closed off. Beautiful. And we're also just looking for clues, who is this guy? The whole bless this mess and all that other stuff, as they're kind of searching the room. It's giving us a lot to investigate. By having us in this small space, it's meaningful. Everything we see suddenly has meaning. And so we can do all these little detail shots, and everything that, Hamish is doing, and the production designer, everything they're putting on in the room suddenly becomes significant and just adds so much more to the story that we're paying attention to. And of course, we care less once we're worried, we care less about our surroundings per se once we're worried for Barnes and Paxton, right? The visual interest isn't boring anymore because of how threatening it all feels, right? Cages are inherently not boring. And just because of that tension that they generate. And then of course the lighting and all that, everything they're doing from the lighting perspective adds a sense of depth and mystery. Turning it off the lights creates a really strong visual shift, as well as ramping up narrative tension, right? Which is really nicely juxtaposed against Mr. Reed's, good read, as Hamish put it, that whole aw shucks attitude, until he shifts into those things that you were talking about, like the weirdly weird, kind of conniving evil aspects of his personality. But I think the best way to hide the space and keep it from being boring is having a strong story that keeps pushing our characters around and pushing them forward, without them even having to move. So just thinking about that first room that they enter, that lets us move the camera around them to tell their emotional journey. So in the living room, they're simply sitting on the couch. But as the conversation pushes them into the deep and the deeper end, and disorients them, we move around from these two shots into these close-up singles. And Barnes and Paxton are no longer this unified front. They're suddenly being scrambled and overwhelmed by Reed. And so the visual storytelling can really kick into another gear there, as opposed to something like Sunset Limited that doesn't do a lot of close-ups. They really leave you hanging in these wider shots. This says, okay, we're going to start in these wides, but then they're really going to close off them from each other, because once the attitude and the tension shifts, they can no longer really have proper conversations with each other. And that begins to isolate them visually, to kind of help tell that kind of other element that they're experiencing emotionally. It's just really, really beautiful. And now in the close-ups, we can also see who is paying attention, who reacts to something being said. We can see Reed look at Barnes after she makes a comment, right? Because Paxton is still trying to have these conversations about, oh, well, what did you learn from reading how did it make you feel? I think that's what she says. How did reading the Book of Mormon make you feel? Like, what did you learn about our Heavenly Father? Like, she's still but something is clicking for Barnes. She's paying attention to this dynamic, and she's like, is your wife going to join us? And that's when we start pushing into these close-ups. He's noticing her noticing. He's like, yeah. What do you think she's baking? Can you tell what my wife is baking? What kind of pie is it? And now he's gaining control because he can feel Barnes start to wrestle and maneuver because she's noticing something. And he's like, this is my way of, by pushing into these close-ups, you can see him noticing her gamesmanship while also maneuvering back into power. And so we can feel all those dynamics it's just so cool to watch. One of my favorite things in cinematography is that subtextual conversation that's happening that you can communicate visually. We're observing people observing each other. And they just do that so beautifully through the timing and understanding when it's a really good moment to shift into these perspectives. And this probably takes forever to film. You can't just roll 3 cameras and get your coverage and move on. Like they're going to interrupt each other. You need to light it, set up your dolly work, and then I assume it also takes just a ton of rehearsal to keep performances feeling consistent. Because if you're going to take, 2, 3, 4, 5 days shooting that first room, it can't just suddenly jump in tone. Like it has to have a very consistent throughput. And so I imagine they're doing a lot of like starting the day with, we're going to run through the scene. Okay. Remember that feeling, remember that tone, remember how you sounded, remember that look. And then now when we move into this very specific dolly move, because they're dicing up all these moments with specialty shots, we're going to do a slowly dolly move right here when he says this line, and then we're going to get a reaction shot. You need everyone to emotionally be able to connect and dial in immediately. And I imagine this was also storyboarded and prevised within an inch of its life so that they know we need these specific shots, and we'll have some outs in case we get into the editing room and it's not really working. We'll have these outs, but more or less, this is exactly what it's going to be. And so it doesn't surprise me when Hamish says that they didn't change any of the dialogue, or if they did, it was very, very minor. And probably to the extent that they did, it's because Chloe East and Sophie Thatcher are stepping in and saying, actually, as a Mormon, I probably would have said it this way, and just honing it in that way, but nothing dramatic and stuff that's probably fixed in rehearsals. The last note that I'll drop here on cinematography is the blueberry candle reveal is so good. It's one of my favorite. I have like 2 or 3 favorite shots. The water dumping scene on the table, freaking love it. It's visually compelling while also doing all those things we talked about, like aiding the narrative for the viewer. But the other big one is the blueberry candle reveal. This is one of the first big hints that this guy ain't right. And so we watch Sister Barnes. He leaves the room, right? And we're watching Sister Barnes as she's kind of looking and taking in the room before her gaze finally kind of falls on us, on the camera. And then we do a reverse shot of what she's looking at, which is the candle itself. Reverse back to her. She's got the sudden curious look. And then we move into this lower shot of this slow circle dolly around the candle as she slowly turns it. It's just ramping up the drama by slowly taking her time. And then as we complete that move, we move into a reaction shot of her face and the surprise and shock. And then we reverse back to the candle and we start on the wick and then we do a slow tilt down to the label, revealing that it's a blueberry pie scented candle. And it's just this wonderful buildup that lets us know this is an important moment. They've been deceived by our charming and idiosyncratic host, if you will. And we feel the danger. Does he have a wife? Is he going to hurt them? All these questions and fears spring to mind about what happens next. They should get out. And of course, all that gets triggered very, very quickly. But it's just so beautifully executed because I think for me as a filmmaker, I'd be thinking about how do I reveal this? And so watching a master craftsman like Chung-hoon approach it this way is like, oh, for me, it's really, really helpful. And I can't wait to get this movie on like Blu-ray so I can dice up how he's doing all these things. Like, how is this moment built? Where are we cutting to? What are the angles? What are the moments in the dialogue? Like, I want to know all that stuff because this is an absolute craft. It's a masterclass of perfectionism. Like, I am just blown away. And then the editor is going in and just fine tuning it all. Like, it's just beautiful. My last little moment comes to something you said earlier about how she changes from being a really sweet person to not. And that's a hard line to walk. And it's the self-talk. That's this very tricky thing to do, because whenever you have characters talk to themselves, it can feel really gimmicky and even worse, brutally expository. Like, oh, they're saying this so the audience knows it. And we did a film a few weeks back that did it so poorly that we had to call it out. And this, they do it really, really well. And it happens, they set it up, and I'll get to the big moment here in a second, but they set it up at the doorstep. When they get to Mr. Reed's door, we see Sister Paxton rehearse to herself what she's going to say. Hi, my name is Sister Paxton, and this is my sister. And, she's working through it, and we're watching her through the eyes of Sister Barnes, who's kind of awkwardly watching her like, damn, girl, like, you got to get it together. But it's also kind of charitable, like she's rooting for her. So there's a sweetness to it as well. But it's important because later, when Barnes dies, she's no longer there to watch after her and help smooth it all out, right? We see Paxton feeling trapped, and she tries to escape, and the door's locked because of all the nice setup work that they do there. And she says to herself what Sister Barnes had told her: challenge him, debate. That's a crucial, critical moment in her journey, because up until that point, right, she's been very compliant. And so at that moment, we need to hear it. It doesn't feel like exposition, but it is, because she's about to shift her whole character dynamic, and it cannot be done silently, or else it'll feel like a random, unearned shift in her character. Like, where did this come from? Like, we need to hear her change and then feel good about her character switching from that compliant and soft-spoken Mormon missionary to a strong and combative woman fighting for her life. And that's that moment that we recognize as, okay, she's going to now encourage herself into this next, phase of her personality. And it's just so smoothly done that you don't realize they're doing it. And I was just really impressed, because that's a hard thing to pull off, and they do it without you even noticing. But they set it up through that first scene of just watching how she's processing things. Yeah. And so
great point there.
Oh, yeah. There's so much other stuff to cover that, we're just running long. Like there's a moment whenever Sister Barnes is like taking him, and that moment you talked about where she's calling him out and trying to challenge his arguments. And she makes this beautiful statement about, I don't think what I believe fits into your belief or disbelief. I think there's a whole spectrum that your binary system doesn't take into account. And she's not sure how to proceed because her beliefs actually don't fit within the binary. And so I think there's a comment about her belief system is different. Maybe she's agnostic and she's working through what she believes in the same way that Mr. Reed was working through his beliefs, because what she says next is so good, because she says, Sister Paxton, do you still believe? She nods. Then let's screw through that door. She's relying on Sister Paxton's beliefs and going with her instead of saying, I can't make a decision because my beliefs aren't here. And it's very smoothly, subtly saying maybe agnosticism is underrepresented in our binary way of thinking in life of, is there a God, is there not? And so I think for me, the last butterfly shot, I think it's the filmmakers doing the final flourish of this entire movie, which is you believe whatever it is you want to believe. Like, is there a God? Is there not a God? Because he's preaching about this whole idea. There in your life is only going to be a before and after. There will be before you witnessed a woman die and come back to life, and after. And he thought in his mind he was setting that up with his little fake miracle, planting this dead girl and then having one of his, sycophants, followers replace her and pretend to have come back to life, which only is passable because of how brutally he treats them. And for him, they're fungible, they're interchangeable. And so you get to the end of the film and you see there actually was a dead woman who came back to life. That was our sister Barnes, who was occupying this agnostic area. Like, she neither believed nor disbelieved. And so you get to the very end of this believer who's gone through this whole gamut. Does she believe or does she not believe that butterfly actually landed, or did it not? It's letting the viewer kind of take her place of, do you still believe in God after being challenged, or do you not? They're not trying to decide that for you. And yeah, I think it's meant to be an open-ended question after experiencing a challenging conversation. I don't know. For me, I see it as she no longer believes. She saw something, and maybe it was miraculous, maybe it wasn't. But there's this look on her face after she sees the butterfly, and then it disappears. She suddenly looks up, and I think she's confused and is having a revelation of her own, that maybe there is nothing out there. I don't know. Maybe I don't have a strong idea about the ending after all. Do you have a strong feeling about the end?
No, not really, because I don't think it, I like what you said, that it leaves it up to interpretation completely. And I think depending on the day, I could look at it and think she saw it in the first place. So it's still there. But I could also think she saw it and then she saw it disappear. So basically, like what you said, she's watching her beliefs kind of disappear. So I think it might just depend on where you are when you're watching this film. And that's what makes it so good, is that films can do that kind of thing. Do you see the glass is half empty, half full? Depending on your perspective on that day, is just so great. Or how many times you've seen the movie. Maybe because of a certain scene and the filmmakers didn't even intend it. Because, like, let's be honest, I think 100 million decisions have to go into making a movie, and they all are decided with what do we want the viewer to feel. But it's a story. So there are also 100 decisions that are going to result in a different feeling that is unintended by the filmmaker as well. So they're just trying to tell a story, and they're making all these decisions to make you feel a certain way, but you're going to digest it however you're going to digest it in that moment. And maybe there's some unintended, feelings and emotions that come up. I think that's totally plausible as well. So yeah, that's that. Movies in general, that's why I love what they do for us. But this one specifically, we referenced Sunset Limited in this, but that's only because the only reason is because of the subject matter, right? For me, and the acting. Obviously, the acting is fantastic, but the subject matter of that film is very similar in this regard. But they are nothing alike in any way, shape, or form, except for that ending feeling of, what am I feeling right now? Do I feel like I still believe? Do I feel like my beliefs have been upended? Am I going to let a movie really do that to me? No, but you might let, discussions and topics within that movie. No, it's not the movie. It's the raising the question, and if the answer is better than what you could provide, maybe you might question things. Anyway, I think it's brilliantly done. You're right.
Agreed. Like, it's so wonderful, and I think it's necessary because the other thing that is clearly not Mormonism, if you've read or know anything about it, they don't really believe in reincarnation. And so having a missionary in front of, like, a heathen saying, like, I hope I come back as a butterfly, is absurd, obviously. But it creates space for this conversation at the end of the film. And so that's a story need, even if it doesn't represent reality. It's there to further the conversation that you're talking about, to walk away and say, okay, yeah, maybe I'm not going to let a movie push me off my beliefs, but maybe I can have a conversation and let it challenge me without me feeling insecure about being challenged. That's really hard to do, and very few people do it. And I feel like they were encouraging that, to have this kind of conversation, say, how do you feel now? Is there anything, there's a comment that Sister Paxton says after he's suddenly doing this whole simulation theory. And she's like, it's not falsifiable. Like, there's no way to disprove your theory. And he's like, yeah, but that's all religion. And so it's encouraging along that same lines. Like, if you can look down your nose at simulation theory, but not at creationism, when they're effectively the exact same thing, maybe you should slow your pace and rethink what you believe to be true about the world. This is a really sophisticated, beautifully written film that it's a dream. Like, I'm so jealous that they wrote this and made this. I hope, they keep writing, and I cannot wait to see what they make next. I don't know.
The last thing I'll say is, and I don't want to get into, the nitty gritty about religion. I think we do that pretty good in our Sunset Limited episode. But there is something to be said, I think, of the fact that religion in general discludes a lot of people. It includes you if you agree with it, but it discludes you, whatever that word is. I don't even know what the word is. Unincludes you if you don't. And that's the kind of thing that, like, bothers me a lot. So, and I think that they do a really good job of touching on that here. It's not like the main focus of it. It's just an aspect of it that he brings up. So
absolutely,
really well done.
And I love that he is preaching hardcore to these women, and they don't resist or push back because of the implied threat or power dynamics, right? And I just feel like that's not so different from the church itself. It's hard to push back or argue with these overpowering authority figures. When's the last time you got to sit in the pew and challenge the person preaching at you? You don't get to do that there. And this is kind of an inversion of that dynamic. Like, how does that make you feel? Like, whenever you're telling someone your beliefs and not allowing them room or space to dissent or contradict you, like, that's not a healthy conversation. And so I feel like it's subtle. They're having such a nuanced, thoughtful conversation and creating all kinds of implications by reversing the dynamics of normal witnessing. I adore it. This might be my favorite movie of the year. It's certainly fighting with Dune Part 2. Like, we'll see where it comes out in a couple of weeks whenever I put together my silly list of top 10 movies. But this is up there, bro. This is up there for me.
Wow, that's a big statement, man. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Dude, so what are you going to recommend this week?
I'm going to go totally off book here. But me and the kids just watched this last night for the first time in a long time. I'm going to recommend, I just really always loved this movie. I'm going to recommend Man of Steel. Nice. Which it's been 10, 11 years. I think it came out in 2013, 2014. I don't know, whatever. But Hans scored it. And I think Chris Nolan was an executive producer on it as well. And I love Henry Cavill as Superman. I think that the story was really interesting and unique. I think they did a really great job dressing all of the crazy sets of Krypton and everything. You really felt like you were on a whole nother planet. I think that the suit was fantastic. The sound effects on it were incredible. I mean, so many explosions and buildings falling, obviously, but the idea of Superman flying, there's an explosion when he takes off, like that. It feels real. It feels visceral. Yeah. Of course, I feel like that would probably happen. It was just, and it's wonderful to watch it with my kids. I just really enjoy it. So I'm going to recommend Man of Steel. It's streaming on HBO. On Max, whatever you want to call it.
I'm going to recommend another difficult watch, way more difficult than Heretic. It's called Compliance. It's not based on a true story per se, but it is based on similar events, which is really difficult. But it's about a fast food joint that gets a phone call from someone claiming to be management, and an employee has stolen from us, and we need you to go take her into the back room and search her. And it becomes this very grotesque, abuse of power in so many ways. And the element that I liken it to with this film, Heretic, is how difficult it is to shoot in tight spaces, and how brilliant they are in doing that and executing that. It's very, very difficult, content. Just maybe watch a preview before you hit play. And if I ever need to study again, or need to study cinematography within tight spaces, that was even smaller. Like, you're basically shooting half a film in a closet, and how do you make that visually interesting and fresh, for 90 minutes? It's really, really strong. And so I have no plans to ever watch that movie again unless I need to study it. Like, it's just so brutal, but also really useful in terms of challenging authority and challenging what you know to be true and why you know it to be true. And I think in that way it also aligns very strongly with thematically with Heretic. And so, yeah, check that out maybe. And stay tuned for next week. We have a decision. We're going to take a look at the Netflix animation series Arcane, seasons 1 and 2. And so that'll be really fun. Todd and I are basically just dying to talk about this show. So you're going to get it.
Oh, yeah, you are.
And so I'm excited. And if you're enjoying the show, don't forget, subscribe, drop us a review, leave us a note if there's something you want us to talk about. And if you want to leave a note on this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/heretic.
And our quote of the day is from Richard Dawkins. I think that when you consider the beauty of the world and you wonder how it came to be what it is, you're naturally overwhelmed with a feeling of awe. Yeah, that's a very good parallel to what you would call God, right? Like there's just so many millions, trillions of things that had to happen in perfection and timing for us to literally be sitting here right here in this moment talking about this and just talking about us as individuals, like the idea of consciousness and happening. It is overwhelming. And so it's much easier to just say there's a being in the sky or something that created it all. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong for believing that. But I am saying it makes, this is a great quote for the argument for God, for sure.
Yeah, because that's whenever you experience that, whenever you have what you're talking about and what he's talking about, just understanding how the world exists at all, I can see why we invent those things, thousands of years ago. It's hard to wrap your head around that. And I'm also thankful for science for filling in some of those blanks. That's like, okay, if you don't want to live with this omniscient being sitting over your shoulder, you don't necessarily have to. You can find another way of explaining reality in your life. But all that to say, it's a lot to think about, and I don't fault anyone for believing in a higher power. And that's definitely not where I'm at, and I hope that's okay with you too. We can all,
you know what
coexist.
else I'm thankful for?
Yeah.
I'm thankful for Hamish for joining us today.
Oh yeah.
That was wonderful.
So amazing. Thank you, Hamish, for giving us some time,
Yeah.
brother.
Yeah. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. I had a blast. I always love having Hamish on the podcast. Always. This is the second time.
Yeah.
I can't wait for the next time, honestly. I just love talking to that guy. Such a wonderful, wonderful human being, and his work is fantastic. So thank you, Hamish, and thank you, Wes, for getting him on. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode of Heretic. If you liked it, please review us, share us, subscribe, all that good stuff. It really helps out more than you know. We really appreciate it. If there's a film that you'd like to see us pick apart, please let us know. Maybe we'll cover it. Who knows? Until next time, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies. it.
Dude, I think this wins Best Original Screenplay. I think this is a shoo-in.
Yeah. I think so too.